Thanks, Fred. Appreciate being here today. This is an exciting opportunity, I think, for the U.S. Certainly, and for building relationships around the world for us. This panel, Engineering, Technology, Infrastructure, and Legal Perspectives, obviously is a key one. Many of the advancements and the opportunities that we have to be able to export U.S. LNG globally are a direct result of advancements in technology, and as a lawyer myself, hopefully a result of legal and regulatory advancements that allow for the more efficient and more economic movement of commodities globally. We have got a great panel this morning of technology providers, engineering firms, and legal advisors, and we're going to give you just a very broad overview of global infrastructure needs and issues. We'll do very quick introductions so we can keep this on schedule. First, we have Mark Schott, the Senior Business Director with Honeywell UOP. We have Pablo Avogadri, the Global LNG Platform Leader with Baker Hughes. Jay Farrar is the Vice President for Government Affairs and Head of the Washington Office for Bechtel. My friend Tom Holmberg, a partner at Baker Botts. And John Bigalbal, Managing Director of Fuels for AES Corporation, based here in D.C. as well. Great, so we'll go ahead and get started. Mark, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, Honeywell has a great diversity in its technologies and really a global technology provider. Can you talk a little bit about Honeywell's role in the global LNG and natural gas business and from your perspective, where you see the most significant opportunities and potential challenges for the business?
Okay, thank you, David. So Honeywell is involved in over 60% of the current LNG production in the world, either from a Honeywell UOP pretreatment technology point of view or from a controls and safety systems from our Honeywell Process Solutions. We've been involved in the energy industry for over 100 years. We focus significant amount of time in helping develop new technology, new business models to facilitate trade in this area. In particular, recently we've been focusing on delivering modular mid-scale LNG technology, pretreatment controls for the U.S. industry to provide faster scale up, lower investment cost, better life cycle economics for those suppliers so that American LNG can be exported to many places in the world. Listening to the panels and the discussions earlier, it's obvious that the world is changing. Being in this business for over 100 years, we've seen a very significant change in the last 15 years, from oil-led energy economies to now gas-led energy economies. And gas infrastructure is becoming the key initiative in many regions, will enable growth and nation building in many emerging economies. And we see that U.S. LNG is actually a key cornerstone of the ability of the world to make that conversion from oil to gas. We are focusing on being able to deliver better, lower cost, more cost efficient U.S. LNG from a liquefaction, transportation, regasification. And we're working on new technologies in the U.S. to take pipeline gas, which is unusual in most places in the world, and process it efficiently in the infrastructure, in the liquefaction process here. We're also developing new technologies that will allow us to convert LNG into polyolefins, polyethylene, polypropylene, so that new countries can build their own petrochemical industries sooner and at lower cost than they currently can today.
Pablo, Mark talked about that transition from oil to gas and a number of economies. Baker Hughes, obviously leading oilfield services provider globally. I note that recently you've been rebranded as the world's first and only full stream company. I think of kind of coining of the terms petrodollars 40 years ago. We now have full stream company. Can you talk a little bit about that ambition and from Baker Hughes' perspective, where the global opportunities are for the LNG and gas business?
Right. So yeah, roughly a little more than 100 days in this journey. Look, we heard what the market challenges were when we decided to make the move to merge the Baker Hughes, so oil stream services, and oil and gas heritage business. We have the last 3 years, but more in the next decade, to have a lot of projects, a lot of gas-stranded resources that have difficulty moving into FID, so being economically viable. And in the last months or years, we achieved a lot of good results in getting the single pieces of a value chain down in costs and time and efficiency, like drilling time, for example. We have places where it's now 1/3 of drilling time compared to 5-6 years ago. In infrastructure, where the heritage oil and gases was doing, we have cost down even 30%. Like if we compare the cost of liquefaction in Gorgon in Australia, for example, to the last announcement that many of our customers are announcing here is a fraction of those costs. The opportunity we see going forward, and that's why we launched this new company, is optimizing the entire value chain. I think that no one else has really looked at the entire value chain. And if we look at the gas value chain, it's a gas production. Yes, it's the well drilling, the gas treatment, production, but then there's also transportation. We heard people in the previous panel talking about the challenges in transporting gas in an efficient, fast way. It takes a long time, permitting. But then there's also the use of gas. You can use gas in the petrochemical industry. You can use gas for power generation. And we want to make the entire value chain really efficient. And that's what we're trying to do. You see that we are the only one that is really looking at the entire value chain. In the oil and gas, the oil and gas business, we are looking at downstream, so the use of gas for petrochemical, power generation. Clearly, we heard Romania announcing one of our projects there. And our first full stream project actually has been just awarded a few days ago. It's with Trinza. It's in Gulf of Papua. What we do there, we're going to drill the appraisal wells together with the customer, of course. Then we are, of course, allowed to do the entire full field development, so with wells and the pretreatment modules, the power generation module, compression modules in the platform. But together, we will make sure that this project, we will take out contingencies over contingencies. We will optimize the subsurface and the surface. We will really look at the financing. We will look at the way this gas will be marketed to make really this project moving through FID in a seamless way. That's the ambition.
That's great. Thank you. Jay, Pablo talked about optimizing the value chain. Many in this room obviously are familiar with Bechtel and Bechtel's important role in certainly monetizing the gas reserves through liquefaction. I'd be curious, kind of given Bechtel's presence globally and the fact that you are working so closely with a number of U.S. project developers for liquefaction, how Bechtel is looking at the business going forward and where you see opportunities.
So I think most people realize that Bechtel as a company brings a totality to any project that we're asked to work on. I mean, what we pride ourselves on is something called certainty of outcome. We are technology neutral, so to speak, so we work with our clients to provide them the most optimal technology. And from the very beginning of a project, studies, engineering, permitting, design, And then finally, construction and delivery and operation. Bechtel moves in that space, and most people know that the 3 very large plants in Australia were Bechtel projects, and they're all producing now. Cheniere down in the south, same. And so we see ourselves as offering the best opportunity for our clients to achieve what they need from their demand pull, if you will, for energy and power generation. One of the key factors that's driving the market now is the low cost of oil, and that is making it difficult for a lot of potential customers to move to LNG because the price factor is just not optimal, even though most economists would say now is probably the best time to build facilities because the prices are down for construction and procurement. But we're realistic about that. So we will work with our clients to scale the best solution for their problem or their demand. And we see a lot of smaller countries who have the need moving toward a desire to create these facilities so that they can overcome some of their shortfalls in energy production and power production going forward.
That's great. Tom, you're the legal representative here on this panel. We've worked together for a number of years. I remember, I think 11 years ago, sitting with you trying to figure out some gas quality challenges that we were facing as we were talking about importing LNG into the United States. As a lawyer and as kind of being in the marketplace and trying to bring buyers and sellers together, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on some of the shifts that you're seeing and potential challenges that the industry may face.
Sure. I was thinking about this issue last night and talking about it with my wife and was discussing the need to bring buyers and sellers together. And she said, you should get an app like Tinder for LNG. And my first thought was,
left.
Yeah, exactly. My first thought was, wow, we should get to Silicon Valley. That could be a moneymaker. My second thought was, we've been married for 15 years. What the hell do you know about Tinder? So I'm going to have to check her phone out this weekend. But moving on beyond that, there are a lot of veterans in the audience today. But for those of you that may be new to the industry, historically, traditionally, the LNG industry was one in which it was a very point-to-point market. You had very large LNG production facilities, very large, expensive LNG regasification facilities, and the cost necessary to construct those was backed by long-term 20-year contracts. As more and more of these facilities have been constructed, we have a much more diffuse market, a lot of different types of players and so forth, and a lot more supply in the market. So what's happening is you have a lot of buyers, a lot of sellers looking for a home for their product, trying to develop markets. You have a lot of buyers in this low price environment taking a wait and see attitude. So it is indeed kind of a buyer's market. What sellers need to do in order to successfully bring their goods to market, is try to meet the buyers where they are. And the key to that is, of course, giving the buyers the flexibility they're asking for with a project that is ultimately bankable, because there's a tension there between buyers seeking perhaps shorter term contracts, more flexibility in the types of take requirements that they have and the pricing and so forth, with the financing requirements, which are traditionally, want a steady flow of cash over a long period of time to repay the cost of these very expensive facilities. So the challenge there is for sellers to work with the buyers to come up with some sort of flexible arrangement that is appealable to banks and other sources of finance for these projects. And that takes a lot of work. But I think that's something that the sellers are obviously working on now. There's a lot of good things happening in the market to help bring these parties together.
Great, thank you. John, last certainly not least, we've heard a lot of discussion certainly about the Pacific Basin. People talk a lot about the Asian markets. I think Fred was talking about that earlier. But AES is currently constructing a combined cycle power plant and LNG terminal in Panama, kind of moving and thinking about the Americas. You were a leader on that project. Can you talk a little bit about that experience there in terms of the infrastructure, the project development, and then also AES's broader plans at looking at the Americas and how to distribute gas and LNG throughout the Americas?
Is this on? Yeah. Thank you, David. For those that aren't aware, AES is currently undergoing construction of a 350 megawatt power plant and integrated LNG terminal in Colón, Panama. The project, actually the power plant and the terminal will be ready for use mid next year, and the storage tank will be ready for use about a year later in 2019. It's a $1 billion project. The power plant is a 350 megawatt power plant, which is probably on a little small side for an LNG terminal, and Bechtel could probably attest to that. But we do have a full-scale terminal, and the storage capacity will be 180,000 cubic meters. I would say, I came to this and I wanted to think about, what I thought about was what were the difficult tasks of getting this project done. And I have to say that working with Panama, the country, that was not a problem at all. In fact, we were awarded this PPA in 2015, and it was a competitive auction, and the auction actually incentivized the use of natural gas. And it also required that if you were going to propose natural gas, that the gas had to be Henry Hub indexed. So that was a big benefit, and the way they valued that was when they looked at all the offers, anybody that proposed natural gas got a 5% deduction on their levelized cost of energy. So that was very helpful. So the country was definitely not a hurdle. But when you look at Panama, it's a very small, not well interconnected market. They do have the CIPAC line. It doesn't carry a lot of power. And you're trying to get an LNG terminal, which typically, rule of thumb, is probably 500 to 700 megawatts as an anchor tenant for a terminal, and you're trying to get a terminal built. So it's the market size in Central America and the Caribbean makes it difficult. And then I would say that volatility of the electricity market is another big issue that we had to try to solve. I'm sure it's not solved. We'll see when the project goes online. Panama is dominated by hydro plants. And so there could be times that the thermal plants aren't needed at all. And we have to work with LNG supplies. You think about a 350 megawatt power plant, a single tanker is 2 months worth of gas. So you try to get as much flexibility upstream, and then you got to figure out the downstream, especially if you've ordered these cargoes and the rains come. So I would say volatility, market size and volatility were probably our two biggest hurdles to try to solve. But the one thing that's really interesting for us in Central America and the Caribbean is that these are markets that are dominated by oil. So we think there's a lot of opportunity to do conversions in the region. Obviously, there needs to be a lot of infrastructure invested there. But we've had some pretty good success in the Dominican Republic. We've been operating a terminal there since 2003, and it was dedicated to our power projects. In 2010, we opened the terminal up, and we put in truck racks. And we also interconnected another power plant with a pipeline. And that business took off quite well. So we do see a lot of opportunities. It's a matter of how to, redistribute, or not redistribute, but distribute from these terminals out to the market and try to replace some of this fuel oil being used. And with that, we formed a partnership with our supplier. Our power plant is under contract with NG. The LNG will be coming out of the Cameron facility in Louisiana. But we formed a partnership with our supplier where we're going to try to do just that, is use the two terminals as hubs to distribute gas throughout Central America and the Caribbean via trucks or barges or vessels, and maybe some pipelines too. So.
Thank you. It's not very often, I think, your lawyer tries to keep things on schedule and brief, but we were given a very short window here, and so I think we've heard some great introductory views in terms of technology, in terms of engineering and legal advancements. I think that there's a lot of opportunities going forward. Again, it is in large part due to technological and engineering developments that we are able to be in the position that we're in today globally as the largest producer of natural gas in the world, and hopefully eventually the largest exporter of LNG in the world. So if you would join me in thanking the panel for their contributions today.